The head of Palantir Foundry for Builders just did an interview, which is about 6 minutes long. I want to run through it, share my thoughts where I think it is necessary. And I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I think we can go through it together and see what we can learn. So let's go.
Joining me today is Meredith McNaughton. She is the head of Foundry for Builders at Palantir. Meredith, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Great to be here, Judy. Thanks for having me.
And just before we go ahead, I'd say go ahead and follow her on Twitter. I will leave her link to Twitter in the description. I was having some problems with her handle, but we should definitely get her some followers.
All right, now, Meredith, before we get into the details on Foundry for Builders, which is Palantir's offering for early stage and growth stage companies, can you give us a quick rundown of what the platform is?
So Palantir is a software company that builds products that power data-driven operations and decision-making across some of the world's largest and most important institutions. We got our start in 2000.
So I just wanted to cut her off there and just highlight on the fact that she talked about largest and most important, but emphasis on largest, at least as I'm hearing it. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that's what they're currently doing. That obviously that's not a secret, right? But let's see how she kind of leads that into, if she does, again, I haven't seen this whole thing, how she leads it back into what they're doing now with Foundry for Builders and the smaller companies.
2004 with our Gotham product, which is used primarily in the government context, but we've since expanded to supporting over 40 verticals across the private sector with our Foundry platform. And you can think about Foundry as an operating system that modern companies use to run their business. For example, it's been used to ramp up the production of airplanes, to accelerate scientific discovery, to help build safer cars and more resilient supply chains.
Safer cars, that's interesting. I know we have heard, I believe, was it Chrysler? What was the company? Leave it in the description, or sorry, the comments if you recall.
Foundry really helps organizations and their users, both technical and non-technical, not just see their data, but really understand and contextualize it all in one place. And the power comes then when teams can harness that source of truth to innovate at a faster rate and get better at doing that over time.
That is the alpha they always talk about. Understanding the data at a non-technical and technical level and generating solutions based on that. That really is the power of Palantir.
Great. So tell us about the Foundry for Builders program. What's the genesis of the program?
Absolutely. So when we looked at the market for our software, we knew that younger companies could benefit from a platform to help accelerate their growth. In many ways, Palantir actually still operates like a startup. And
I love that. That is what I was wanting to hear, not even from her, just from the company as a whole. It's a really key insight. And it's great to know that that's how they're thinking. That is probably the answer to the question I've been asking. Why so much equity? Why are you funding the business with equity? Well, that's what startups do.
we deeply value technology that keeps us focused on our core mission and operating as efficiently as we can. But for startups, the way to engage with Palantir on Foundry wasn't really formalized.
And sorry, I'm terrible at this. I've never done a reaction like this before, or I have once, but it wasn't like this. So I also just wanted to say that if Palantir is operating like a startup, 0 to 1 still applies. So I wanted to tie that back in, but now we're getting a little meta here. She's talking about startups using Palantir Foundry. I'll try not to interrupt as much.
Till actually earlier this year, when a Palantir alum left the company to start his own, and he reached out and basically explained, look, I'm spending a ton of my time as CEO and all of my engineering time trying to piece together a tech stack that works. And essentially that was a data integration component, something for transformation, something for analytics, a custom application builder, something to manage models. And essentially all of his time was going to attempting to make that work rather than focusing on his core mission, which was essentially helping older Americans make better Medicare plan decisions. And so, he asked, can I license Foundry? And so that gave us an opportunity to build out the program. At first contained to just Palantir alums. But what we realized is that even the non-Palantir engineers on these early Foundry for Builders teams were up and running and building new workflows and applications in the platform at a pretty unprecedented pace. And that then gave us a conviction to expand the program, not to just Palantir alumni, but to a broad set of early and growth stage companies.
I really love that story about how it was an alumni that had already left the company, but then really realized that his or her business could really benefit from using Foundry. And because it was not a big business, right? It was probably a startup. I forget exactly what she said, but that Palantir Foundry really is so effective in what it does that it saves you so much time that you cannot go without it. Just think, this is someone that knew of Foundry, knew of its power, knew of its existence, left the company, and then realized, I cannot do this. I really need this software. That is the stickiness we've been talking about. That network effects are real. And Foundry really is going to have some huge impacts if it can. And this is the key point: save everyone that uses its time. That's the number one thing you're paying for. And can you even put a price on time? It's really not. I mean, you can, and that's what you're getting charged for. But it's huge.
Tell me about the types of companies that are in the program.
All kinds. We have companies in areas ranging from entertainment to fintech to robotics. We actually just announced our first blockchain company called Elementus, which is using Foundry to make it easier for different players in the blockchain space to understand and equate things that are happening on chain with real world entities. We also announced our first builder in the digital nutrition space called FoodSmart, which is focused on making healthy eating more accessible using Foundry. So basically, there are many different types of verticals, but the common thread is that these are all companies that want.
I did not mean to pause it there. Not even that it was a bad pause. I just did not mean to pause it. But really interesting how she chooses those two companies, right? Because what she's saying basically, and now that we know Foundry for crypto, it's kind of a different deal, but she's saying these are two companies that wouldn't really be served otherwise. These are not companies that would have been served by traditional software of any kind. So I guess that's the comment I would add when I'm not even meaning to add a comment.
Create value for themselves and for their customers as quickly as possible.
Do you have some examples of how companies are using Foundry?
In the renewable energy space, a startup called Bayou AI is using the platform as an operating system to manage wind farms. So different example, but what they're doing is integrating sensor, weather, turbine, historical kind of production data, applying machine learning and physics-based algorithms on top of that unified data asset to ultimately increase the capacity of wind farms, improve power generation, and reduce long-term maintenance costs for their customers.
That's huge. And so it really comes back to, again, time and cost. Lowering the cost of operations and saving you and your company's time. And that's just huge. I love the physics and the engineering behind certain algorithms that Palantir can just crunch through to get the best output. It really is inspiring to hear.
In a very different context, there's a clinical care company called Emeria who's working to enable researchers to discover novel treatments faster by bringing all of their data plus doctors and patients into the platform. So zooming out more thematically, I would say builder companies are using the platform in a few different categories. Many of them are focused on Foundry as a core data engineering foundation, essentially using Foundry to help accelerate the delivery of their own external product faster.
Listen to this again.
Essentially using Foundry to help accelerate the delivery of their own external product.
Listen to that. She says accelerate the delivery of an external product faster. Speed. This is what it's about. And it's not just Foundry. Now it's Foundry for builders. So basically, it's Foundry for smaller companies that can now harness this power that bigger companies, some of the most important names she was saying in the beginning, have already been using.
Others, though, are now starting to build out applications directly in Foundry itself, using the platform not just as a backend, but as a front end too. And then still others are using Foundry as their total operating system across all areas of their business. And some of the ones in these more traditional industries like energy and manufacturing are thinking of it as bringing a software edge to their non-software company.
That's interesting. So I would like to know, if I could ask Palantir, what percentage of companies are you seeing use for front end and or back end and or the entire operating system? Because the bull case is the entire operating system. This is what they were telling us investors. We are the operating system for the modern enterprise. So I would like to know how many companies, as she just said, are actually using it for just that.
Okay, so Meredith, if I'm a startup, how do I know if I need Foundry?
In our experience at Palantir, staying hyper-focused on our core technology and mission has been the biggest driver of our impact. And similarly, we think that all companies and startups should be focusing their finite time on whatever will be driving the most value for them. Foundry makes it so that startups can refocus their technical team's efforts on increasing the ambition of the company and not manually piecing together different systems or provisioning and managing cloud infrastructure. In some way, focusing on keeping the tech stack above water rather than really leveraging the tech stack to accelerate their core business. So I would say really any company with an active data engineering or operational challenge that they're trying to solve quickly with a team that's ready to start building could absolutely benefit from exploring Foundry for Builders with them.
So any company with an operational challenge, that pretty much sounds like any company trying to do really anything. So maybe I read too far into that, but what do you think about this statement she just said?
All right, Meredith, it's been wonderful to talk with you. Thank you for joining me on NYSE Floor Talk.
Thanks for having me.
I think she did a great job. A lot to glean from that. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, it's great to hear from someone that we haven't heard from before on Palantir. And yeah, I hope this little breakdown was helpful. I know there was a lot going wrong with kind of my stopping of the video, but very insightful video. Loved hearing about Foundry for Builders and more content coming your way. Until next time.